What does God do when you are hurt? Discover his 25 answers, your Bible wisdom. Have you ever been in situations where it seemed like people were against you, doing everything to bring you down? When injustice hurts and you don't know how to react? Today, we're exploring something powerful. What God actually does when you're hurt. Not just general comfort, but 25 specific life-changing ways he responds to your pain. What makes this message unique is that we're not just talking about surface-level solutions. We're diving deep into biblical wisdom that has transformed lives for thousands of years, bringing it into our modern context in ways you might never have considered. Have you ever wondered why some people maintain unshakable peace even when everything seems to be falling apart around them? Or how certain individuals emerge stronger from situations that would break most people? You see, when you're facing hurt or injustice, it's easy to feel alone, to feel like no one truly understands what you're going through. But what if I told you that God not only sees every detail of your struggle, but has specific, powerful responses ready for your situation? In this video, we'll explore how God turns evil into blessing, how he fights your battles, and how you can find peace, even in the midst of storms. These aren't just theoretical concepts. They're practical, life-changing truths that have helped countless people find strength when they needed it most. By the end of this message, you'll understand how God actively works on your behalf, often in ways you can't imagine. 25 powerful ways he responds to protect and uplift you. Practical steps to access his peace and protection in your daily life. How to turn moments of pain to testimonies of victory. And there's something very special waiting at the end. A powerful prayer that could be the turning point you've been looking for. If you've ever felt overwhelmed by hurt, betrayal, or injustice, write trust in the comments below. Let's create a community of support and faith right here, showing others they're not alone in their journey. Stay with me because great revelations are about to unfold that could completely transform how you handle life's challenges. The 25 Divine Responses. Part 1. Immediate Comfort Responses. 1-5. How does God respond when your heart feels shattered into 1,000 pieces? What happens in those moments when the pain seems too heavy to bear? Have you ever wondered if he truly sees your tears in the darkest hours? Let me share a powerful story that illuminates God's immediate comfort in our pain. In the heart of New York City, Sarah Matthews sat in her corner office, staring at an email that would change everything. After 15 years of dedicated service, her position was being restructured. Corporate speak for being pushed out. The betrayal cut deep. She had mentored the very person who engineered her departure. This modern story echoes an ancient one found in the book of Genesis, where we meet Joseph, a young man who faced a betrayal so profound it would shape the course of history. Like Sarah, Joseph's story begins with a devastating blow. His own brothers, consumed by jealousy, sold him into slavery and told their father he was dead. Picture this: a 17-year-old boy thrown into a pit by those he trusted most, sold like cattle to passing merchants. The Hebrew text tells us he begged for mercy, but his brothers refused to listen. Can you imagine the depth of that betrayal? But here's where God's first response to our pain becomes evident, his immediate presence in our darkest moments. The scripture tells us, the Lord was with Joseph, Genesis. The Lord was with Joseph, Genesis 39:2. Not just in the good times, but right there in the pit, in the slave caravan, in the foreign land. This brings us to God's second response. Divine protection, even when everything seems lost. Just as Joseph found favor in Potiphar's house, Sarah discovered unexpected allies in her workplace. A senior board member, moved by her integrity, offered her a position at a partner company with better terms than her previous role. The third response reveals God's emotional healing process. Notice how Joseph maintained his character despite his circumstances. Similarly, Sarah chose not to seek revenge or spread bitterness. This wasn't just human resilience, it was God's supernatural comfort at work. Fourth, we see spiritual strength emerging from weakness. Joseph's time in prison became his preparation for leadership. Sarah's period of uncertainty led her to start a mentorship program for other professionals facing similar situations. The fifth response shows us God's peace transcending circumstances. Joseph's ability to interpret dreams in prison wasn't just about the gift. It was about maintaining connection with God despite his situation. This peace became his testimony, just as Sarah's graceful handling of her transition became hers. Think about this. Both Joseph and Sarah could have been consumed by bitterness. Instead, their stories reveal a pattern of divine comfort that transforms victims into victors. Joseph would later tell his brothers, "You meant evil against me, but God meant it for good." Genesis 50:20. What makes these responses so powerful is their timelessness. The same God who walked with Joseph through betrayal, who strengthened Sarah through professional crisis, is walking with you through your pain right now. If you're facing a situation that feels overwhelming, know that God's comfort isn't just a distant promise, it's an immediate reality. His response begins the moment your heart cries out, even before your lips form the words of prayer. As we move forward to explore how God actively fights our battles, remember this: your pain isn't just being endured, it's being transformed. Your story isn't just about survival. It's about revelation of God's faithful presence in every step of your journey. Share in the comments if you've experienced God's comfort in unexpected ways by typing comfort. Your testimony might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Now let's discover how God turns from being our comforter to becoming our defender as we explore his active intervention in our battles. Part 2. Divine Intervention Responses. 6:10. Have you ever felt like you were facing an impossible battle? What if I told you that God's intervention in our lives is far more active and powerful than most people realize? Could it be that what seems like your darkest hour is actually setting the stage for a divine breakthrough? Let me share with you God's responses, 6-10, powerful ways he intervenes in our moments of crisis. God's sixth response: he turns impossibilities into miracle. Picture this: a vast army surrounds Jerusalem. King Hezekiah and his people face certain destruction. The Assyrian forces, having already conquered numerous nations, mock the God of Israel. The situation seems hopeless, exactly the kind of moment where divine intervention proves most powerful. In 2 Kings 19, we witness one of the most dramatic displays of God's intervention in biblical history. That night, as Jerusalem's citizens trembled in fear, God sent a single angel. By morning, 185,000 Assyrian soldiers lay dead, and the mighty army retreated in disgrace. This wasn't just a military victory. It was a testimony to how God intervenes when human strength reaches its limits. Think about that. One angel, one night, one impossible situation, completely reversed. God's seventh response: he fights battles you can't see. Consider the story of the prophet Elisha in Dothan. His servant wakes up one morning to find their city surrounded by enemy forces. Panic grips his heart as he sees chariots and soldiers everywhere. But Elisha remains calm, asking God to open his servant's eyes. Suddenly, the servant sees what Elisha already knew was there: the mountains full of horses and chariots of fire surrounding their enemies. A heavenly army, invisible to natural eyes, but more powerful than any earthly force. This reveals a profound truth. When you're facing opposition, there's always more going on than what you can see. God's intervention often operates in realms beyond our physical sight. God's eighth response: he provides unexpected solution. Remember the Israelites at the Red Sea, trapped between Pharaoh's army and an impossible water barrier. They faced what appeared to be certain doom, but God's intervention rarely follows our expected patterns. Instead of giving them boats or making their enemies disappear, he split an entire sea. Who would have thought of that solution? This teaches us that God's answers often come in ways we never imagined. God's ninth response. He uses your enemies' plans against them. Consider the story of Esther, a divine chess game where every move by those intending harm ended up advancing God's purpose instead. Haman built gallows to hang Mordecai, but ended up hanging there himself. Every plan meant for evil became a stepping stone for deliverance. God's 10th response. He turns your prison into your platform. Joseph's story powerfully illustrates this principle. Sold into slavery, falsely accused, imprisoned, each setback appeared to push him further from his destiny, yet every prison became a platform. Every betrayal a building block toward his ultimate purpose. From the depths of an Egyptian dungeon to becoming second in command of the most powerful nation on earth. Joseph's journey shows us how God can turn our darkest moments into divine positioning for purpose. What's remarkable about these interventions is how they demonstrate God's perfect timing. He doesn't just solve problems. He transforms situations in ways that leave no doubt about his involvement. If you're facing what seems like an impossible situation right now, I want you to write "believe" in the comments. Let's create a powerful testimony of faith together, knowing that God's intervention often comes at the moment when all human hope seems lost. As we move forward to our next section, you'll discover how God not only intervenes in your situations, but also transforms your identity through these challenges. Every battle you face is an opportunity for Him to reveal more of His character through your story. Now that we've seen how God intervenes in our battles, let's explore how He transforms these moments of crisis into catalysts for profound personal growth. This understanding of divine intervention isn't just theological. It's practical, personal, and powerful. It reminds us that no situation is too difficult for God, and often what looks like defeat is actually the setup for His greatest victories in our lives. Part 3. Transformation Responses, 11:15. Have you ever felt like your world was falling apart, piece by piece? Have you wondered why some people emerge stronger from trials that would break others? What if I told you that transformation often begins in our darkest moments? Let's explore God's transformative responses when we're hurt, starting with a powerful story from ancient Jerusalem. God's 11th response. He judges justly. Picture yourself in Jerusalem around 586 BC. The city lies in ruins, smoke rising from the temple. The Babylonians have destroyed everything the people held dear. Among the rubble stands Jeremiah, the weeping prophet, watching his people being led away in chains. In this moment of utter despair, when justice seemed lost forever, God revealed something profound through Jeremiah's words. For the Lord will not cast off forever. Though He causes grief, yet He will show compassion according to the multitude of His mercies. Lamentations 3:31-32. This wasn't just about ancient Israel. It's a timeless truth about God's character. He judges justly, even when everything appears unjust. Think about that for a moment. When Jeremiah wrote these words, he wasn't speaking from theory. He had witnessed unspeakable tragedy. Yet in the midst of devastation, he discovered a profound truth about God's justice. But how does this apply to our modern lives? Let me share a contemporary story that illustrates this principle. Sarah, a dedicated nurse, faced wrongful termination after standing up against unethical practices in her hospital. For months, she struggled with the injustice, watching her reputation being destroyed by false accusations. Like Jeremiah amid Jerusalem's ruins, Sarah felt abandoned. But she held onto her faith, trusting in God's justice. 18 months later, an independent investigation vindicated her completely. Not only was she reinstated, but she was promoted to a position where she could implement positive changes throughout the hospital system. God's 12th response. He gives deliverance to the righteous. This brings us to David's extraordinary testimony in Psalm 34:19. Many are the afflictions of the righteous, but the Lord delivers him out of them all. Consider David's situation when he wrote these words. He was hiding in caves, running from King Saul, who wanted him dead. Everything seemed hopeless. Yet in this desperate situation, David discovered a profound truth about God's deliverance. God's 13th response. He transforms hearts of stone. In the bustling streets of ancient Nineveh, we find Jonah, a prophet filled with bitterness and hatred toward an entire city. His heart was hardened like stone against these people. Why? The Ninevites were known for their cruelty, especially toward Jonah's people, the Israelites. But God had a different plan. Through an extraordinary sequence of events, a violent storm, 3 days in a fish's belly, and a second chance at obedience, God wasn't just working to save Nineveh. He was transforming Jonah's heart. Ezekiel 36:26 captures this divine promise perfectly. I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit in you. I will remove from you your heart of stone and give you a heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh. This transformation isn't just about ancient prophets. It's happening today. Let me tell you about Michael, a corporate executive who had become hardened by years of betrayal and office politics. His bitterness had created walls so high that even his family couldn't reach him. But God began a remarkable work in his life through an unexpected crisis. When his company faced bankruptcy, Michael found himself on his knees for the first time in decades. In that moment of vulnerability, something began to change. The walls started crumbling. The heart of stone began to soften. God's 14th response. He gives peace that passes understanding. Have you ever witnessed someone maintaining perfect peace in the midst of chaos? It seems almost supernatural, doesn't it? Consider Paul and Silas singing hymns at midnight in a Philippian jail, their backs bleeding from severe beatings. Philippians 4:7 describes this phenomenon, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. This isn't just positive thinking, it's divine intervention at the deepest level. God's 15th response. He brings beauty from ashes. In the ancient Middle Eastern world, sitting in ashes was a sign of complete desolation. Yet Isaiah 61:3 promises something remarkable. God gives beauty for ashes, the oil of joy for mourning. Think about the transformation of Job. He lost everything, his children, his wealth, his health, his reputation. As he sat in ashes, scraping his sores with broken pottery, his situation seemed hopeless. But God wasn't finished with his story. The end of Job's story reveals a stunning transformation, not just in his circumstances, but in his understanding of God. He declares, "My ears had heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you," Job 40:2-5. Today, this same transformative power is at work. Consider Maria's story, a single mother who lost her home in a devastating fire. As she stood in the ashes of everything she owned, she couldn't see any hope. But God began a beautiful work. Through her community of faith, doors began opening. Not only did she receive practical help, but her testimony of faith during crisis touched countless lives. Today, she leads a ministry helping other families in crisis, turning her personal ashes into something beautiful that blesses others. These transformative responses show us something profound. God doesn't just change our circumstances, He changes us. Every trial becomes an opportunity for divine transformation, every setback a setup for something greater. If you've experienced any of these transformations in your life, from hardness to compassion, from chaos to peace, or from ashes to beauty, share your story in the comments with the word restored. As we move forward to explore God's victory responses, remember this crucial truth. Transformation is just the beginning. God is preparing you for something even greater. Part 4. Victory Responses 16:20. Have you ever felt completely surrounded by circumstances that seemed impossible to overcome? What if I told you that even in your darkest moments, God is orchestrating a victory you can't yet see. What would change in your perspective if you knew that every attack against you is actually setting the stage for an incredible testimony? Let me share a powerful story from the Bible that illustrates God's victory response in seemingly hopeless situations. In the book of Daniel, chapter 6, we find a remarkable account that resonates deeply with anyone facing opposition or injustice. Daniel, a man of unwavering faith, served as one of the highest officials in the Persian Empire. His excellence and integrity earned him such favor with King Darius that he was about to be promoted above all other officials. But this success sparked intense jealousy among his colleagues. These officials, consumed by envy, devised a cunning plan. They convinced King Darius to sign an irrevocable decree that anyone who prayed to any god or human other than the king would be thrown into a den of lions. They knew Daniel's devotion to God would not waver, even in the face of death. Now, imagine yourself in Daniel's position. The law has been signed. Your faith is criminalized. Every prayer could cost you your life. What would you do? Daniel's response reveals the first key to experiencing God's victory. Despite knowing the consequences, he continued his practice of praying 3 times a day, windows open, facing Jerusalem. He chose faith over fear, integrity over safety. When Daniel was thrown into the lion's den, it appeared his enemies had won. But God was orchestrating something magnificent. He sent his angel to shut the mouths of the lions, demonstrating his sovereignty over nature itself. The next morning, Daniel emerged completely unharmed, not even a scratch on his body. But God's victory wasn't just about Daniel's survival. The story takes an unexpected turn when King Darius, witnessing this miracle, issued a new decree acknowledging the power of Daniel's God throughout the entire kingdom. The very plot intended to destroy Daniel became the catalyst for spreading faith in the true God across an empire. This dramatic reversal demonstrates 4 crucial aspects of God's victory responses. 1. He prepares a table. Response 16. Even in the presence of your enemies, God provides and protects. Just as Daniel was preserved in the lion's den, God sustains you in impossible situations. 2. He turns curses into blessings. Response 17. What your enemies intend for harm, God transforms for good. The plot against Daniel led to the advancement of God's kingdom. 3. He brings public vindication. Response 18. God often allows your victory to be witnessed by those who opposed you, just as Daniel's accusers saw his triumph. 4. He establishes his authority. Response 19. Through your victory, God demonstrates his power to others, just as King Darius came to acknowledge the true God. 5. He creates lasting impact. Response 20. Your victory becomes a testimony that impacts generations, just as we're still drawing strength from Daniel's story today. Think about your current situation. What if the opposition you're facing isn't just an attack, but rather God's setup for a magnificent display of his power? What if your lion's den moment is actually the precursor to your greatest testimony? As powerful as these victory responses are, God's work in your life goes even deeper. Let's explore how he uses these moments of triumph to establish lasting peace in your heart, transforming not just your circumstances, but your entire perspective. If you've ever experienced God turning a situation around in your life, write victory in the comments below. Your testimony could be the encouragement someone else needs today. Remember, just as Daniel's faith remained unshaken in the face of death, your trust in God's victory plan positions you for a breakthrough that will impact not just your life, but countless others around you. Part 5. Eternal Promise Responses 21-25. Have you ever wondered why some people maintain unshakable faith even in their darkest hours? What gives them the strength to stand firm when everything seems to be crumbling? How do they find peace when chaos surrounds them? let me share a powerful story from ancient Jerusalem that reveals these eternal promises of God. During one of the most challenging periods in Israel's history, King Jehoshaphat faced what seemed to be an impossible situation. Three powerful armies were advancing against his kingdom, vastly outnumbering his forces. The people were terrified, and destruction seemed inevitable. But in this moment of crisis, something remarkable happened. Instead of rallying his troops or forming military alliances, Jehoshaphat did something unexpected. He turned to God in complete surrender. In the courtyard of the temple, before all the people, he prayed a prayer that would change everything. "We do not know what to do, but our eyes are upon you," he declared. In that moment of vulnerable honesty, God's first eternal promise was revealed. "The battle is not yours, but God's." 2 Chronicles 20:15. This wasn't just a historical event. It was a demonstration of God's 21st response to our pain. He takes ownership of our battles. When we're hurt, when we're overwhelmed, when we don't know what to do next, God steps in and says, "I'll take it from here." The story doesn't end there. God then did something unprecedented. He instructed Jehoshaphat to send singers ahead of the army. Not soldiers, but worshippers. Can you imagine the scene? As the enemy armies approached, instead of the clash of swords, the air was filled with songs of praise. This reveals God's 22nd response. He gives us supernatural peace in the midst of chaos. The peace that comes not from the absence of trouble, but from the presence of God Himself. "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. My peace I give you, I do not give to you as the world gives." John 14:27. As the story unfolds, we see God's 23rd response. He turns our challenges into testimonies. The enemy armies became confused and turned against each other, completely destroying themselves, while Jehoshaphat's people simply watched in amazement. What began as a potential tragedy became a powerful testimony of God's faithfulness. But there's more. The aftermath reveals God's 24th response. He provides abundance even in our valleys. The people spent 3 days gathering spoils from their defeated enemies, so much that they couldn't carry it all. What looked like a death sentence became a source of unprecedented blessing. Finally, we see God's 25th response. He establishes lasting peace. The surrounding kingdoms, hearing what God had done, began to fear the Lord, and Jehoshaphat's kingdom experienced peace on all sides. The fear of God came upon all the kingdoms of the countries when they heard how the Lord had fought against the enemies of Israel. 2 Chronicles 20:29. This ancient story mirrors the eternal promises God makes to us today. When you're hurt, when you're facing impossible odds, when you don't know what to do next, remember, God's responses haven't changed. He still takes our battles, gives us peace, turns our challenges into testimonies, provides abundance, and establishes lasting peace. Think about what you're facing right now. Perhaps it feels like 3 armies advancing against you. Maybe you feel outnumbered, overwhelmed, uncertain of what to do next. God's eternal promises are still active, still powerful, still transforming impossible situations into testimonies of His faithfulness. As we prepare to close in prayer, I want you to reflect on these eternal promises. Which one speaks most directly to your situation right now? Share in the comments below by typing peace, strength, or victory. Let's create a community of faith and support right here. Let's create a community of faith and support right here. Let's move into our final moment together. A powerful prayer that will help you apply these eternal promises to your specific situation. Stay with me because this could be the turning point you've been waiting for. Interactive elements. Have you ever wondered how powerful a single moment of faith can be? What if one act of trust could change not just your life, but echo through generations? And what if I told you that such moments are happening right now, in this very community? Let me share with you a remarkable story that demonstrates God's extraordinary way of working through our interactions with Him. It's a story that begins in the heart of modern-day New York, but mirrors an ancient biblical truth that has transformed countless lives. Sarah Mitchell, a corporate executive in Manhattan, found herself facing the ultimate betrayal. After 15 years of building her department, her trusted deputy had secretly orchestrated her removal, presenting manipulated data to the board. The evidence seemed stacked against her, and her reputation, everything she'd worked for, was crumbling. This situation mirrors the biblical account of Daniel, who faced similar betrayal from his colleagues in Babylon. Just as Daniel's rivals manipulated King Darius to issue an edict that would trap Daniel, Sarah's deputy had carefully constructed what appeared to be irrefutable evidence against her. But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. Instead of fighting back immediately or seeking revenge, Sarah did something remarkable. She remembered the words from Psalm 46:10, "Be still and know that I am God." In the midst of corporate chaos, she chose to pause and pray. She shared her story in our online community, simply writing "Trusting God in the Storm" with the number 7, our community's symbol for complete trust. What happened next was extraordinary. Hundreds of believers from around the world began responding, sharing their own stories of workplace betrayal and triumph through faith. But it wasn't just about emotional support. As Sarah later described, each comment felt like a brick in a wall of faith being built around her. Then, just as in Daniel's story where God sealed the lions' mouths, something unexpected happened. A junior staff member, moved by the prayers she'd seen online, came forward with evidence. She had backed up the original data that proved Sarah's innocence. The manipulation was exposed, not through Sarah's efforts, but through God's orchestration of events. This story reflects a profound truth about interactive faith. When we share our struggles and trust God publicly, we're not just seeking support. We're creating a testimony that God uses to move in powerful ways. Just as the early church shared their burdens and saw miraculous responses, our modern community of believers continues this powerful tradition. Now, I want to invite you to be part of this ongoing story of faith. What situation are you facing that seems impossible? What battle feels too big to fight alone? If you're dealing with betrayal or injustice right now, type 7 in the comments below. Let this be your moment of public trust, your declaration that you're choosing to believe in God's intervention. Remember, just as with Sarah's story, your act of faith might not only be your breakthrough, but could become someone else's testimony. And as we move forward in this message, you'll discover how God specifically responds to such declarations of trust, turning what the enemy meant for harm into powerful testimonies of his faithfulness. Let's continue our journey together, exploring how God's responses to our pain create a tapestry of hope that extends far beyond our individual stories. Your story of faith might be the key that unlocks someone else's prison of doubt. As we witness how God works through our community's faith declarations, let's explore the first of his 25 powerful responses to our pain. Practical application section. Have you ever wondered how ancient biblical wisdom directly applies to your modern struggles? What if I told you that the same divine principles that transformed lives thousands of years ago are still just as powerful today? And more importantly, what if these principles could revolutionize how you handle your current challenges? Let me share a powerful story that illustrates exactly how God's responses to our pain remain timeless and transformative. In the heart of New York City, Sarah Matthews, a senior executive at a prestigious firm, faced what seemed like an insurmountable crisis. After 15 years of dedicated service, she discovered that her colleagues had conspired to frame her for financial misconduct, a situation that threatened not just her career, but her entire reputation. This modern scenario mirrors an ancient biblical narrative, the story of Daniel in Babylon. Just as Daniel faced false accusations from jealous colleagues who conspired against him because of his excellence and integrity, Sarah found herself in a similar position of unjust persecution. The parallels are striking. In Daniel 6, we read how Daniel's excellence in his work made him stand out, leading others to seek his downfall through deception. Similarly, Sarah's consistent high performance and ethical standards had made her a target. But here's where God's response becomes evident in both stories. In Daniel's case, God didn't prevent him from being thrown into the lion's den. Instead, he demonstrated his power by shutting the lions' mouths, turning what was meant for destruction into a testimony of divine protection. The very thing meant to destroy Daniel became the platform for God's glory to be revealed. Similarly, Sarah's response to her crisis reflected deep spiritual wisdom. Instead of immediately launching a counterattack or seeking revenge, she did something unexpected. She followed the biblical principle found in Exodus 14. The Lord will fight for you. Every morning before entering her office, Sarah would pray in her car, surrendering her situation to God. She maintained her integrity, continued to excel in her work, and refused to engage in office politics or retaliation. This wasn't passive acceptance. It was active trust in God's justice. The turning point came 3 months later in what can only be described as divine intervention. A series of technical glitches in the company's system revealed the truth. Emails and documents surfaced, exposing the conspiracy against her. The very technology that her accusers had used to frame her became the instrument of her vindication. But here's what makes this story truly remarkable: Sarah's response to her vindication. When given the opportunity to press charges against her accusers, she chose mercy over vengeance. This decision, reminiscent of Joseph's response to his brothers in Genesis 50:20, transformed the entire office culture. Today, Sarah leads corporate ethics seminars, sharing how biblical principles of forgiveness and integrity can transform modern workplaces. Her story has become a testimony of how God's answers to our pain aren't just about personal vindication. They're about transforming entire communities. This modern application of ancient wisdom teaches us several crucial principles. 1. God's timing is precise. He allows situations to develop for greater purpose. 2. Divine protection doesn't always prevent trials, but ensures victory through them. 3. Our response to injustice can become a powerful testimony. 4. God can use modern circumstances to display his timeless power. As we continue to explore God's responses to our pain, remember Sarah's story. It stands as a powerful reminder that whether in ancient Babylon or modern New York, God's principles remain unchanged. His power to transform situations, heal hearts, and bring justice is just as active today as it was thousands of years ago. Now that we've seen how God's wisdom applies in real-world situations, let's explore the specific steps you can take to access his peace and protection in your daily life. But before we move forward, I want to hear from you. Have you experienced a similar situation where God turned a challenging situation into a testimony? Share your story in the comments below, and let's build each other up with our testimonies of God's faithfulness. Conclusion: as we come to the end of this journey together, let's reflect on the profound truths we've discovered about God's responses when we're hurt. These aren't just ancient promises. They're living, breathing realities that can transform your life today. Throughout this message, we've explored 25 powerful ways God responds to our pain. But perhaps the most remarkable discovery is this: every moment of hurt can become a gateway to experiencing God's power in ways we never imagined possible. Think about it. How many times have you felt alone in your struggles? Yet today we've seen that God not only sees your pain, but has specific, intentional responses ready for every situation you face. From turning curses into blessings to fighting battles on your behalf, his care for you is both personal and powerful. The question now isn't whether God will respond to your hurt. We've seen that he absolutely does. The real question is, Will you allow these truths to transform how you face your challenges from this moment forward? You're not here by accident. Perhaps you've been carrying a burden that feels too heavy, facing situations that seem impossible, or dealing with injustice that appears overwhelming. Today could be a turning point. I want to extend a special invitation to you. In the comments below, share one truth from today's message that spoke directly to your heart. What situation in your life needs God's divine response right now? Your testimony could be exactly what someone else needs to hear. If this message has touched your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Help us spread these transformative truths by liking this video and subscribing to our channel. Click the bell icon to ensure you don't miss any future messages of hope and biblical wisdom. Remember, you're not just subscribing to a channel. You're joining a community of believers who are discovering God's faithfulness in their daily lives. Every week, we'll explore more profound truths that can revolutionize your walk with God. And here's something special for you. In our next video, we'll be diving deep into understanding God's timing in our trials. You won't want to miss these revealing insights that could change how you view your current challenges. Before we end, I want to remind you of something crucial. Your pain is not the end of your story. God is working even now in ways you might not see or understand. Trust His process. Believe His promises. Expect His intervention. Thank you for journeying with us today. May God's peace guard your heart, His wisdom guide your steps, and His love strengthen you for whatever lies ahead. Until next time, remember, you are seen, you are loved, and God's response to your hurt is already in motion. If you received hope from this message today, write renewed in the comments. Let's create a wave of encouragement that touches lives across the globe. God got you, and I'll see you in our next video, where we'll continue exploring God's incredible promises for your life.